This video is on the YouTube channel of the Miami Valley Fair Housing Center. My name is John Zimmerman, and I am the Vice President. Welcome to this segment of a recorded live class on the 2022 Reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. So our first section is going to be why VIWA, and that's our acronym for it, VAWA or VIWA. Um, who the covered housing programs are, who must come into compliance, and the VIWA definitions. So on March 15th, 2022, the president signed into law this Appropriations Act, which included the Violence Against Women Act. And this is a link to it and a QR code that you can go directly to that to read it from the Federal Register. And I'm not an attorney, so what I'm going to be doing today is that I'm going to be showing you best practices and things which attorneys and HUD has said are the best practices to come into compliance with all fair housing laws. So this bill authorized new programs and it makes changes to federal criminal laws and establish new protections to promote the housing stability and the economic security for victims of four things: domestic violence, sexual assault, dating violence, and stalking. Now, there are other laws like the Fair Housing Act that also protect this, but this statute is specific to this, unlike the Fair Housing Act, which covers many things with many protected classes. So violence has many serious effects on families. They can be physical injuries. People can feel suicidal. They can start drinking, doing drugs. It affects people's eating, sleeping, and there can be increased anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, and depression symptoms. The Also, we looked at the numbers, okay? And from July of 2022 to July of 2023, we saw that there was 112 Ohio fatalities and 82 cases of domestic violence, and 52 females and 60 males. 40% of the deceased victims were people of color, and then 30% of the cases had children present at the scene. So we are really happy that Congress reauthorized this and added things that make it more robust. So rural areas, especially when we look at things outside of Montgomery County, we look at Preble County, Miami County, Greene County, Auglaize, the rural areas, there are special problems that domestic violence and stalking victims face. So poverty, lack of transportation, shortages of healthcare, either lack of insurance or underinsured. Confidentiality is a huge, huge issue in smaller towns, and decreased access to education, job opportunities, and basically sometimes geographical isolation. The cities, though, also have huge problems. 44% of cities surveyed by the federal government identified domestic violence as the primary cause of homelessness. 92% of homeless women experience severe physical and sexual abuse. Of all homeless women and children, 60% have been abused by age 12, and 63% have been victims of intimate partner violence as adults. So both rural areas, so everywhere there is a problem. One of the new things that's really important, and when this came out, we were like, oh, we've got to get busy and work. And that's why I'm doing these classes. As a part of the reauthorization, Congress required HUD to implement and enforce the housing provisions of VIWA consistent with and in the same manner that they do the Fair Housing Act. So we have had cases where there's dual filings, one under the VIWA statute and one under the Fair Housing Act statute. So, and it has the same rights and remedies as provided by the Fair Housing Act now. So the two statutes, link arms and go down the road together. But I am going to talk to you a little bit later about the differences between the two. And sometimes people think that they have a VIWA claim, but really their claim can only be met under the Fair Housing Act. So that's something we'll talk about when I get to a particular slide. So the covered housing programs, Section 202, housing for the elderly, housing for persons with disability, often called Section 811. Sometimes you see 202, 811 combined. Housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, the HOPWA program, the HOME program, which gives subsidies across the region, a lot to independent living senior facilities, the Housing Trust Fund, and then some people call it LIHTC, Low Income Housing Tax Credits, which is administered by the Treasury Department and state finance agencies like OFA. Rural development, there is lots of USDA housing in Miami County. Uh, Section 221, Section 236, public housing, and then Section 8 housing, both the tenant rental assistance and the project-based rental assistance. Single room occupancy under Section 8, and then other programs like homeless programs under Title IV of the McKinney-Vento Act, including ESG grants, continuum of care, which includes rapid rehousing, and rural housing stability assistance programs. So as you can see, there are more people. Every time this is reauthorized, they add more people. We believe that in 2027, when it's reauthorized again, that it will include all landlords. And why shouldn't it? Because that subsidized housing is not the only housing where there's problems with domestic violence, stalking, dating violence, and so forth. So the last part of this section are the definitions. And what I did was that I just took these right out of the Federal Registry. And so that was really the easiest thing for me to do. Instead of, an attorney might give you their version of what this says, but I just want to give you what the Federal Register says. Domestic violence includes felony or misdemeanor crimes committed by a current or former spouse or intimate partner of the victim under the family of domestic violence laws of the jurisdiction receiving grant funding. And so when we get grant funding that goes straight to Troy, straight to Pick, or straight to Miami County, or directly to a public housing authority, we have to look at the domestic violence laws in our jurisdiction, which would be both the city, the county, and the state of Ohio. In the case of victim services, it includes the use or attempted use of physical abuse or sexual abuse or a pattern of any other coercive behavior committed, enabled, or solicited to gain or maintain power or control over a victim. And so that when we have organizations that provide services, one of the things that can't happen because of this definition is that they try to, they can tell someone their options, but nobody can make someone get into safety planning. All we can do is to tell people their options, and that's our obligation. But we can't be in a pattern of behavior that might be considered coercive when we do this. So that includes verbal, psychological, economic, technological abuse, or anything that would constitute criminal behavior. So this is a long definition. It's also a person who is a current or former spouse or intimate partner of the victim, or person that's similarly situated, is cohabitating or has cohabitated with the victim, shares a child in common with the victim, or commits acts against a youth or adult victim who's protected from those acts under the family or domestic violence laws of, in our case, the state of Ohio and across the local jurisdictions. So that is domestic violence, DV. Now we have dating violence, and we just always call it dating violence, so nobody confuses dating violence with domestic violence. So dating violence is committed by a person who is or has been in a social relationship of a romantic or intimate nature with the victim, not necessarily cohabitating, where the existence of such relationship shall be determined based on a consideration of these things. First, the length of the relationship. Secondly, the type of relationship. So if it's a overnight relationship, there might be assault to think about, but maybe not dating violence. Okay. So the type of relationship, the frequency of interaction between the persons involved in the relationship. And so that whether it's short or whether it's long, there are laws that protect us all. But in dating violence, when in fact people are gaining power and control over someone and they're dating them and they're doing it things that are bad to them over a period of time, that could be considered dating violence. And then we have sexual assault and stalking is any non-consensual sex act prescribed by federal, tribal, or state law, including when the victim lacks the capacity to consent. And so we're really always very concerned about institutionalized people who have little ability to communicate verbally and might be disabled in a manner that they really lack capacity. And then even people out in the community sometimes can do that. Stalking means engaging in a course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause us to believe that they could fear for his or her safety or the safety of others or suffer substantial emotional distress. And so we've seen, celebrities being stalked and some terrible things have happened, with somebody repeatedly going after them and they have to get orders of protection from people that do that. So those are the definitions. Questions about the definitions of sexual assault, stalking, dating violence, or domestic violence?